Hey guys, my name's Alicia and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to do a little bit of a book talk because I recently finished this book and I absolutely loved it, and I actually don't hear a lot of people talking about it, so I guess I kind of just wanted to let you guys know my thoughts, and yeah, let's get into it. So the book I want to talk about today is A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. So this is the sequel to his debut novel, which is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. And basically what this book was about is, I don't want to get into too much detail about it, but basically it's about this girl named April May. She's kind of walking around New York City late at night one day when she stumbles across a huge metal kind of robot sculpture. And so she doesn't really know what to think about it, and what she does is she calls her friend and they record this video and basically talking about her finding this sculpture, and that video goes viral. The reason it goes viral is because little does she know that this sculpture has actually turned up in about, I think, like 64 countries in the world at the exact same time, and it's the exact same sculpture. So there's a lot of speculation and wondering about what this is, where it came from, all of that. Later on we find out that this is actually some kind of alien being, some alien entity that has either put the sculpture there or has something to do with it. So through all of that, April May is basically becoming an overnight celebrity. She is continuing to talk about the sculpture and what it means and where it comes from, and obviously everything she's saying is all speculation. She doesn't know anything, until also suddenly basically everyone in the world starts having this recurring dream, and everybody is having the exact same dream. And once you're in the dream, there's a lot of different kind of puzzles that people are kind of going through and having to solve. So throughout all of this kind of craziness, April May is also dealing with the sudden fame and what that means for her, and how she handles that. So that was basically the first book. And so at the end of the first book, and I will be also just as a side note, I am going to be going into spoilers. So if you haven't read the first book, then definitely don't be watching this because I'm going to spoil the end. But basically at the end of the first book, stuff happens and April May seems to die. So she ends up getting into this abandoned warehouse where people are after her, and they light it on fire, and she ends up dying in the fire. Or so we think, until we get to Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. And so this book, I definitely didn't know kind of what direction Hank Green wanted to go in. So I was very pleasantly surprised when this book started, because the first book, we basically were told the whole thing from April's perspective. So every chapter was just, she was the narrator. Whereas this book, we actually have, I think, 4 different perspectives, which are all of April's friends, basically. And basically also because she's dead from the first book, we don't really have her kind of narration until later on in the book. So I really love that aspect of this book, because I think, for me at least, I think April May was a hard character to kind of she took a while for me to actually kind of relate to and constantly hearing her tone of voice in the first book it took a little while to get into for me. I think that also was a stylistic choice by Hank Green, because if you've read the first book, you know the type of the writing style. It's very specific, and it's very, I want to say very YA. So I didn't love that, and also given that these are supposedly adult books, I would call them more maybe new adult. It definitely reads a little younger adult at times, but yeah, so that writing style wasn't my favorite at the start. But this book, because we had different perspectives, there was kind of in a way different writing styles throughout. So I definitely liked that a little more. I also loved being able to get other characters' perspectives. So you had April's best friend Andy, her sort of ex-girlfriend who ends up being her girlfriend later on, Maya, another friend Miranda, and we also actually get Carl's perspective, who is the alien sculpture we later find out is Carl. So that was one thing that I absolutely loved about this book. So a big part of the first book was about kind of April May and how she was dealing with this overnight fame. So she basically, because of this video going viral, suddenly she has, huge amounts of followers on her social media, and she's going on like TV shows and podcasts and things. So like a lot of people are listening to her. So a huge theme, I think, in both books was about kind of fame and influence. And I thought it was such a like cool thing to read about, because I think like obviously this book has a lot of kind of sci-fi fantasy elements, but that kind of idea of people dealing with influence and like your influence over others is in a way like very central to our society today. Because I think in the age of like social media influencers and like so many celebrities, all of that kind of stuff, it's really easy to fall into the trap of like, fame and like getting attention and people just listening to you. So you have to be like conscious of what you're saying and who you're saying it to and like how you present yourself. So I think this book and like Hank Green did such a cool job of like showing that. And that's also where the kind of idea, at least for me, of not really liking April came from. Because I think as she, especially in the first book, as she was kind of becoming a celebrity, you really got her inner thoughts and how she was dealing with it. And at times it was very kind of selfish and very, narcissistic in a way. And so it took her a while to kind of realize that, hey, like I have a lot of influence and I have a lot of people listening to me, so how am I going to use that? And so, like, at the end, I kind of got to a point where I was like, you know what, this is actually pretty relatable, because this is just a regular person who kind of overnight has become this huge influencer. And so obviously like it's going to take a little adjustment and like dealing with that. So I think that aspect was such a wonderfully done and just in a way very realistic. And so April, as she kind of moved along in the story and grew and developed as a character, you really got to understand where she was coming from, and the honestly like the issues that come with having fame and influence and people who are always looking at you. Another thing that was really big especially in the second book, I think, was the idea of power. And so who has power and where do they get the power, how they use that power. Because again, like April May, because of her influence and because of like her follower account, she has a lot of power, and so like power is really just how you come across to others in a way, and actually like a really cool quote in the book was, power is just a lack of constraint. And I absolutely love that idea, because it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who is more talented or more skilled or more like deserving of having power. It ends up honestly usually being people who just have no limits and have no one to tell them no, in a way. So that was a really cool idea. And then also in the book, so another character who ends up sort of being the villain in the first book and in the second book is a huge influence of like the problems, is Peter, who is actually kind of on the opposite side of April for most of these two books. He is opposed to Carl, the alien, and like opposed to the other, whereas April is trying to, bring humanity together and be like, we don't know what this alien thing is and we should like figure it out, whereas Peter's saying, no, like this is, a very fearful thing and we should like eliminate it. So Peter too ends up having a lot of followers, a lot of people who agree with his opinions, and because of that, a lot of power. And he ends up using his power in a kind of destructive way. Not necessarily like directly, but because of his influence, a lot of people are, against April and against Carl and things like that. Another thing in this book was a lot of talk about kind of economy and capitalism and the idea of inequality. Because basically in the second book, we have this new kind of, I want to call it like a virtual reality type of simulation thing that is developed, very like Black Mirror-ish. And the thing is with this technology, it's very expensive, so only a very elite group can use it, the rich people. And so that brings into question the idea of inequality. And so this new technology, which can have a lot of good and can be used to do a lot of good, would only be useful for people with money. And so that idea of, who has access and who should have access, and, you know, there should be equal access, and like, how do people get that, and how do we give that in society? So there's a lot of discussion about that. There's also discussion about kind of racism and discrimination, which again I thought was really wonderfully done. One of the things I actually love that Hank Green did is, so obviously, Hank Green is a white male, and so he has a very specific life experience and kind of circumstances. In his book, he actually had a lot of diversity, but I also think like really good representation, because the main character, April May, is a bisexual woman. Her girlfriend is a black woman. There's a lot of powerful women in this story. So, a lot of different views on the world and society. And actually, I found out that Hank Green had kind of his editors were also like, he purposely used editors who also lived through these experiences, and he did a lot of research and found stuff out so that he could tell these stories in a nuanced way, and I think he did a really great job of that. So on that note, April May's girlfriend, Maya, who is a black woman, she deals with racism and discrimination in this book. And so there's a lot of discussion about, how that's presented in society and how people deal with it. And there's also a lot of talk about kind of allyship and, people who don't have those experiences, how they react to it. And do they just stand by and let things happen? Or do they kind of figure that they have to become educated? They have to understand, they have to help when they can. And so, Maya has this discussion with Andy, who's April's best friend, about, Andy's a good guy, he's a white guy, but he's like, he's trying to like understand things. And he's like a good-natured person. But he also has these kind of ingrained ideas about what it means to be black, and like how black people deal with that, or like colored people deal with that. And so when they enter the VR technology, there's this whole thing about how you are entering into other people's experiences. And so there's this discussion about, as let's say a white person, they're going to go enter into another white person's experience because that's what they're comfortable with. And so Maya brings up the point that, that just kind of perpetuates this kind of ignorant ideology of just, letting people do what they're comfortable with, rather than being uncomfortable, but being open and understanding, and, not just confirming their own ideology, but looking at others. And lastly, what I also want to talk about was the idea of hope and humanity in this book, because I feel like, especially, in these trying, difficult times, and actually I do believe Hank Green wrote this book either right before COVID and quarantine and all of that, or like during. So there's, at least in retrospect, feels like there's some influence of that. But basically, I think one of the main themes of this book was kind of hope and the beauty of humanity. And I think at times it's easy, and it's, you see it all around, where people just do bad things, and there's a lot of bad things happening in society. And this book was a really fresh take on humanity, I think. I think it really showed how beautiful humanity is, and how we as a collective should try to save it and try to help it prosper, and so the whole idea of like Carl, his mission as this kind of alien entity was to come to Earth, and he saw good in humanity. He wanted to make sure that we didn't kind of, I say as if I'm in the book, but humanity in general, to like just, destruct, self-destruct. And so Carl's mission was to come and to bring people together and to show each other that like, you all are good and you can do good. And I really love that. And in this book, the second book, Carl's brother was the antithesis to that. He was like the opposite, trying to, you know, be like, you guys are at this point where there's no coming back and you are finished basically, so I am going to just get rid of you guys, you know. And Carl was saying, nah, like we can do something here, we still have a chance. And so I think that's a beautiful message of just what at the point we are in life today. So while reading this, I really loved kind of, and like I'm not a super optimistic person at times, so I think this book at times did feel a little cheesy and a little too kind of happy and like easy in terms of like the ideas and the themes. But I think it was a really great book to be reading, you know, during quarantine and COVID and like all the horrible things happening in the world, because it definitely brought, to at least me, brought like a different perspective of just, you know, like there's still good that can be done. So I love that part. So yeah, that was me just kind of diving into some of the themes that I found in this book and ranting a little, but overall I just absolutely love this book. I love the themes of this book. I love the characters. This honestly is probably one of my favorite series now. Absolutely loved it. 5 out of 5. Highly recommend it. And yeah, like it was just such a fun read, to be honest. Thanks guys for watching this video, and let me know if you guys like this book, if you've read it. Like I said, I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it. It did come out, I think, early this, or like last year sometime, so it is fairly new, but I just absolutely loved it and I wanted to give my opinions on that. But thanks guys for watching this video, and see you next time.